Many of you watching this likely remember Earthling Ed. Perhaps you've seen one of my videos talking about him. Now, he doesn't usually show up on my channel too often, but he's posted something recently that I just can't ignore, and I find it unbelievably fascinating. So just a little background on Earthling Ed, or Ed Winters. I used to call him Vegan Jesus. He still is Vegan Jesus to me. He kind of has like the Jesus aesthetic a little bit. And he is not your typical belligerent asshole like Tosh Peterson or that vegan teacher or vegan gains. No, he is a much more elegant, calm, more logical, reasonable force, right? That's kind of his style to approaching worldwide veganism. But something really interesting occurred, and I've been noticing unfold in his content and on his Substack, because I keep up with the dude. I'm very curious to the kind of things he talks about and stuff like that. But in the last couple of months, it seems like he has been weaning off of this idea of trying to convert most people or, a significant chunk of the world to being vegan, and just focusing on those who already are vegan or who already show interest that they want to become vegan, and kind of not paying any attention really to people who have shown no interest, which is the vast majority of people, which I think is a good thing. I think what's kind of happened is Earthling Ed has kind of come to terms with reality. He has always been the more logical, forward thinking of many of these vegan activists, and all of the, checks that he's had in his life, and the realizations of, wow, meat consumption, the dependence on animal products so deeply embedded in all cultures all across the world. And it's so deeply embedded into the minds of every individual. And I think he's come to reality that there's nothing he or any vegan could ever do to convert any substantial amount of people to being vegan. So instead, he's kind of shifted his focus on people who already are or are already showing interest, and making veganism a more accessible and more practical for those people, which I think is a very intelligent move. Yes, I'm praising Vegan Jesus. I know. Bless his name. Anyway, let me show you guys what I mean. His example of this is quite clear.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. I just wanted to check in because there's a couple of things that I want to tell you about. One of those things is a really exciting announcement. It's something that I've been working on throughout this year, so I'm really thrilled that I now get to tell you about it. But before I do, I just want to give you a little update about what it is that I've been doing over the past month or so, because I've just finished a speaking tour of South Korea, and it was a really fantastic experience. The tour was busy, but also really fulfilling, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was I got to speak to a wide range of different people. So I spoke to school students, I also spoke to university classes and university students, and I also spoke to politicians and policymakers. I was also interviewed by a number of different journalists, including one who writes for one of the biggest daily newspapers in South Korea. So I got to speak to a wide range of different people, obviously all about veganism, animals, and it was really, really enjoyable, and hopefully had a positive impact on those people that I was able to speak to. But the thing that
I just want to make a comment. Surprised he was able to speak to like policymakers. I mean, Earthling Ed's a, kind of a well-known person like in the vegan space, but like overall, most people have no idea who this guy is. So, and I guess South Korea, maybe they're making a little bit more of a push towards like, plant-based agriculture, things like that. I don't really know. I know roughly 1% of South Koreans identify as strict vegans. It's not exactly an impressive number. So I really don't know like who he got his audience with and how, but good for him, I guess.
What I also want to talk about with you today is this announcement that I alluded to right at the beginning. Throughout this year, I've been working on a new book, and it has been published in December. And if you pre-order it, it will arrive in time for Christmas and also Veganuary. The book is called How to Go and Stay Vegan. And
ooh, what a change of pace. All right, this is the first major talking point. I mean, he'll describe the book and stuff like that in a little bit. I'll let him get his words out, but I need to talk about this. Is important. So the reason why I made those statements at the very beginning of this video is this, right? This new book, along with many other things. But what's so significant about this new book of his is that it is a very, very different tune to his first two books. So his first book is called This is Vegan Propaganda and Other Lies the meat industry tells you. Now, wait a second. There's the point I'm making here. His second book was How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. The third book is How to Go Vegan and Stay Vegan. The first two books both read like narcissistic drivel. That's what both of those books read like. How to Argue with the Meat Eater and Win Every Time. Vegan propaganda and other lies the meat industry tells you. It gives narcissistic, self-righteous, head stuck up my ass drivel. And you would think that his first book would be the one he just wrote of how to be vegan and stay vegan. You would think that as somebody who is trying to promote veganism in a positive way, trying to reach people who want to be vegan and stay vegan, right? That you would think that if he wrote a book, that would be the first thing he would do. That's what any logical person whose goal was that would do. They would give you a step-by-step tutorial on how to be vegan so that people who choose to do so can do so safely and health consciously and not cause irreparable harm to themselves. And he goes on to talk about how so many people quit being vegan, which is what, kind of was a catalyst for him making this book, right? Was that many people go vegan and, they have health problems or social issues, whatever, and they quit, right? They're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. It is an extremely common thing. People quit being vegan more than people quit going to the gym in February after their New Year's resolutions. That's what we're dealing with here. But no, because the fact that the vegan movement, especially, early on and when Ed Winters was writing these books, even at this time, it wasn't really so much about like the individual or the animals, really, let's be honest. It was about control, narcissism, and moral superiority. And a lot of it still is. I mean, there are people who are vegan for health reasons or people who are vegan for themselves. Those people are excluded in this. But for many vegans, especially those you see on the internet, moral superiority is at the forefront of these decisions entirely. It almost has nothing to do with the animals. I mean, you challenge them on so many logical arguments where, if a certain choice that's not vegan is actually better for the animals, they always still choose the vegan choice, which tells you everything you need to know. Like, for instance, like if you tell them, it's not vegan, right? Well, they tell you that it's not vegan for wool to be taken from sheep, right? Well, and you respond with, if you don't do that, the sheep will die, right? They'll suffer immensely. And that's much worse than the sheep having their wool shorn. It doesn't hurt them. And they're like, no, that's still animal exploitation, so you can't do it, it's bad, right? And it's like, well, do you really care about the animal? Because option one of not doing it is more harm to them, and option two is less harm, but yet you want to go with option one. And that's very, very, very common in the vegan community. So it doesn't surprise me that the first two books read as just self-righteous narcissistic drivel. But this third one has simmered down considerably and actually focused on what should have been the forefront of the movement to begin with: transparency, talking about the struggles of being vegan, and then encouraging the correct applications to make sure that your health is in check, that you get everything you need, and that you're aware of the risks. Now, I don't know how transparent he'll be in this book, but there are so many risks that are almost unavoidable for most people. And if they recognize those risks, like iron deficiencies, vitamin A deficiencies, B12 deficiencies, and a vegan diet simply isn't going to cut it, that book should encourage people to stop being vegan and seek something that works for them, that also helps the cause and also helps animals. It's not rocket science, and that's precisely what any logical, forward-thinking individual would do instead of completely just denying science and cherry-picking quote-unquote studies and anecdotal statements that say veganism is healthy for all, when not a single dietitian on this planet would say that. So one can only hope that Mr. Earthling Ed here is fully transparent in his book, but at the same time, he's only speaking to people who already are vegan and want to be vegan, so I really couldn't care less. At the end of the day, it's their decision, and if they end up not being healthy or developing serious health problems because of nutrient deficiencies, because they weren't vigilant and taking their health seriously, that's their own goddamn fault.
And so, as the title suggests, it's the perfect book for any of you who are maybe not yet vegan, but are interested in going vegan. Or maybe you are vegan, but you have non-vegan friends or family members, people who've expressed interest in trying veganism or who are maybe going to be doing veganuary. This book is perfect for them because it breaks down and demystifies the process of going vegan, making it simple, accessible, and achievable for people who might feel like it's a little bit intimidating right at the beginning. But the book is also about how to stay vegan. So it's not just about the process of going vegan, it's also about the process of being vegan. So even if you are a vegan, I have sections within the book that are talking about the experience of being vegan in a non-vegan world. And for those of you who have maybe watched my videos more regularly in the past 18 to 24 months, maybe you'll have seen some of the videos I've made about the experience of being vegan, some of those challenges that we might face, and also about people who have maybe stopped being vegan, people who used to identify as being ethical vegans who are no longer vegan. And in some of those videos, I've been trying to understand why, break it down, what leads to people making these bad, backwards decisions, so to speak. And in the book, I draw upon some of those ideas.
I think that's like a little bit unfair to say that, like, especially because, you know, a lot of times they talk about, gosh, I can't remember, what is that guy's name? I think it's a Cosmic Skeptic. Someone who was like a hardcore vegan activist, and he had to quit being vegan because he had a digestive issue, and veganism simply only agitated it, and so he had to do what was best for him. I hate when vegans call that a bad decision, saying, oh, you couldn't have just found better food, or, you know, it's ridiculous. Your health before the extremely minimal impact that you're quote unquote having for animals. I have to do the reality check in here. I'm sorry to all vegans who think they're actually accomplishing something. You're not. The truth is vegans have done nothing for helping animals in factory farms, those that are treated so poorly, miserably, etc. They have had no impact at all. In fact, factory farms have only seen increased demand since the veganism movement, and continuing increased demand, which means more animals suffering. You guys have not had an impact, and it's fucking sad to have to come to that realization, I know. And I think Earthling Ed has come to that realization, which is why he's not trying to speak to non-vegans really anymore, except for those who are already showing interest, because he knows that there is no world where he is going to ever convert enough people to make any sort of measurable impact. It's sad. I think it would be great if animals had better living conditions and things like that. But at some point much longer ago, all of these activist goofballs should have realized veganism wasn't the answer. It was never going to work. It was doomed from the start. The only reason veganism had such a boom around like 2016 was because people thought they could lose weight. They did it for selfish reasons, just how many people on the carnivore diet are like, oh, look at my weight loss, look at my acne going away. It wasn't for, you know, animals, right? Obviously, the carnivore diet, definitely not for animals, but on the vegan diet most people were not doing it for animals. Even a lot of people who are vegan, quote unquote, now aren't doing it for animals. People just do not care at that level. You can show them dominion, you can show them slaughter and all these things, inhumane conditions all day long, and they'll just say, that sucks, I wish things were better, and then continue to eat their steak. That's humanity. And for somebody who's writing a book that includes, you know, elements of psychology, it seems like you should have come to that conclusion so much sooner. And that goes for all of these vegan activists. This isn't rocket science. It is very, very basic human psychology, and it is not something that can be changed by belligerent assholes. And I know Earthling Ed isn't a belligerent asshole. He's just more of a narcissistic, pretentious goon most of the time. But when you have people like Tosh Peterson and That Vegan Teacher and Vegan Gains like front running the vegan movement, all you do is deter people. And that's precisely what's happened. And the vegan movement is effectively dead now. It is not seeing growth. It is plateaued. It is flat. They have reached equilibrium. Yeah, I think calling it a bad decision to quit veganism when your health is at risk, because again, no matter how much they try to convince themselves of this, it is not true that everyone can be vegan. In fact, the vast majority of people cannot be healthy on a vegan diet without a dietitian in their corner 24/7, which is also not realistic. There's a long list of complications and problems that come from nutrient absorption, nutrient availability, your own body's chemistry. There's so much. It is so deeply involved, and I've explained it so much over the course of many videos, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. Let's move on.
I don't just want to empower people to make the change initially. I want people to stick at it. It's not about being vegan for 4 weeks. It's about being vegan for the rest of someone's life. And so the book is also about empowering people who have already gone vegan, as well as people who are looking to go vegan. It's about demystifying that process, about providing some comfort and reassurance, and about normalizing some of those doubts and challenges that we might have at times during our veganism, those moments where it feels like this heavy weight because the people around us are not vegan, because we're having a hostile conversation with a friend or family member. These moments that over time can start to wear us down and might lead to people stopping being vegan. Well, how can we stop that from happening? How can we make sure that people who are in those environments, in those situations, still feel empowered, still feel confident? So that's essentially what the book is trying to do. It breaks down how...
I've heard him talk about this talking point before, and he was almost kind of leaning on like just being realistic, right? Like, don't expect people to have the same parameters as you, and be realistic with yourself and your relationships, and don't let veganism consume who you are, right? That was kind of his advice. Let veganism be a part of you, but not all of you. And that's pretty much what a lot of people do, is they let veganism be everything that they are. I mean, take that vegan teacher, for example. They alienate everyone else who isn't like them because they just can't relate to them on a moral level, and they think less of them. And that's where you get the whole moral superiority complex for the vast majority of ethical vegans. And believe it or not, Vegan Jesus here has actually been trying to combat that recently, the kind of moral superiority complex of thinking you're better than others, and actually trying to ground yourself in reality, which is kind of what he's hinting at here, but I guess it's going to be in greater detail in his book.
To go vegan, look at the psychology of behavior change, look at the practical elements of that change to veganism, but it also explores what to do once you've made that change, from the practical elements to some of those more emotional, philosophical, and societal challenges that we might face as well. So more specifically, what do I talk about in the book? Well, the book is called How to Go and Stay Vegan. So as you'd expect, I talk about what needs to happen for us to become vegan. So I talk about the food changes we have to make, what do we eat, where do we get the nutrition that we need from, what about the meals that we cook, where can we find plant-based food, what is plant-based food. But I also talk about the other elements, because veganism isn't just about food, it's not a diet change, it's a lifestyle change. And so that includes clothing. So I talk about vegan clothing, I debunk some of the misinformation around certain vegan fabrics, and more importantly, the misinformation around things like leather and wool. So I break down the animal-based fabrics, why we don't want to use them as vegans. But I also look at medication, toiletries, cosmetics, entertainment. What about zoos and circuses and aquariums and such? I go through all of these different arenas of animal exploitation, and I discuss why they are a part of becoming a vegan, why addressing these other forms of exploitation are also a part of becoming vegan. But I also talk about pets. What do we feed them? Is it okay to give dogs and cats plant-based diets, for example? I talk about some of the social aspects. How do we talk to people about that change? What about having kids? What if you have a non-vegan family member, a partner? How do you navigate that potentially complex environment if you want to raise kids as a vegan, but maybe your partner doesn't? I talk about dating.
So I'm going to cut him off right here for a moment, because I want to talk about this, actually. Both, the things he just brought up are really good talking points. When it comes to your pets, you should just always feed them the best food for them. Even if your dog can get by on a vegan diet, you should always strive to feed your dog the best food. I mean, your dog can get by on shitty kibble, but you should still try to give them the best kibble, the best food you can give them. It's the best chance of them having a long, fulfilling life. Technically, for dogs, studies have shown that raw meat, unsurprisingly, has been, the best health-wise for dogs. You can also get really good kibbles and other things. There's just so many different ways to actually feed a dog properly. And vegan just really doesn't make sense. Biologically, it doesn't make sense. I think anybody that feeds their dog a vegan diet is a self-righteous asshole. They think they're so morally superior that they even have to force a canine, which is a facultative carnivore, an animal that is mostly supposed to eat meat and can eat vegetables, but that's not supposed to be the main part of its diet. And just because they quote-unquote can, they do it. And it's like these people don't understand that can doesn't mean that you should. Like, yes, a dog can survive. Many can survive on a vegan diet. They will not thrive. A dog is meant to eat meat. You should feed your pet what they are meant to eat. They don't get that choice. They don't get to choose to be vegan. and it's completely unfair when people force that upon them. Cats, I mean, that just goes without saying. Do not feed a cat a vegan diet. If you feed a cat a vegan diet, you're a piece of shit. Fuck you. Nothing else to say about that. Now, regarding relationships, I'll probably make a video on something like this tomorrow, honestly. I used to do this all the time, where I would cover like Reddit stories of like vegan relationships and things like that, and they were always just so hilarious to me. But relationships are a problem. Let's be real. Vegans, they can't stop seeing themselves as morally superior. The vast majority of them can't. So they have a hard time having a relationship with someone who they see as morally inferior. And also, as somebody who is seen as morally inferior in the relationship, you shouldn't be content with that. You shouldn't look at your partner knowing that they think less of you because you're not vegan, and that they're going to spend every day of their lives trying to silently convert you to being vegan. Like, that is a toxic environment you should never put yourself in. Now, does that mean you as a non-vegan can't be with a vegan? No. If you're with someone who's not an ethically self-righteous, narcissistic piece of shit asshole like many of them, then I think it's possible, sure. Why not? Because then maybe they don't look at you as less than. Perhaps they're vegan just because they personally don't like contributing to the industries that exploit animals, right? That's fine. I mean, my wife, she's not vegan, but she doesn't eat like 99% of meat. The only meat she will eat is chicken, period. Nothing else, right? And she doesn't think she's morally superior to people who eat beef or pork or anything like that. It's her personal choice. She doesn't feel comfortable eating other meats. Now, I'm kind of the same way. I'm a little bit more open to eating certain things like turkey and certain fish and things like that, but generally I don't eat any mammals at all because I just don't feel comfortable eating mammals, you know? And I don't look at anybody who does eat mammals as less than I am. And the vegans need to be that same way, right? If they want to have a relationship with a non-vegan, they need to look at their partner as equal to them despite having slightly different ethical choices in their lives, but most of them are not fucking capable of that. Now, regarding raising kids vegan, I've said this a million times and I'll say it a million times more because I'm very passionate and concerned about this topic. Do not do that. I will firmly say that for most parents doing that, it is abuse of their child, because I don't think the vast majority of parents have the skills, the knowledge, the expertise to raise a kid on a vegan diet without any nutrient deficiencies, without any developmental issues, etc. There have been way too many cases of parents doing this to their children and they end up blind, undernourished, brittle bones, stunted growth. The list goes on and on and on, and brain development, vegetable issues as well. It is not worth it. Your child is a human being. They are their own autonomous individual. Yeah, they're not fully there when they're 2-3 years old, but they become a fully autonomous individual someday who can make their own choices and decisions when you indoctrinate them into veganism. You brainwash them from an early age to think that the consumption of animals is the most horrible, heinous thing you can do. You create so many problems for your child, far beyond just health. Think of the social implications. If they're anything like you, because children tend to mimic their parents, they'll go to school, see their kids snacking on ham sandwiches and bacon and slurping up their dairy milk, and they're gonna sit there judging their classmates, asking them questions of, why do you eat that? You know that's a dead cow, right? You're so evil. You're gonna grow, you have your kid growing up judging their friends, alienating themselves, ruining their own social lives because of your indoctrination. It is vile, it is selfish, and there's not a person alive who should respect that. Also, 99.7% of dietitians, I made that number up, would tell you do not feed your kid a vegan diet. But regardless, even though I made that number up, the vast majority of dietitians, definitely somewhere around 99%, would absolutely recommend not feeding your kid a vegan diet. I've looked into that before. Dietitians are not on board with that. So if you are a vegan and you do choose to do this, if you do not have a dietitian or you're not a dietitian yourself, you don't have a dietitian in your corner 24/7 to make sure your kid is getting everything that they need, despite any sort of problems that they might have with nutrient conversion and things of that nature, then you shouldn't be doing it at all. And even if you do have that ability, I still don't recommend it. It is not worth it. You should let your kid eat what they're supposed to eat as a human being, as a biological human who has certain biological needs and nutrient needs. Let them eat what they're supposed to eat. And then someday when they're old enough to even understand what veganism is, introduce the concept to them. Yeah, they might be a little bit bothered if you come at it the wrong way and be like, ah, man, I've been eating animals my whole life. When most kids come to some realization, probably around 10 years old, that yeah, their bacon came from a pig. I realized that very early on when my mom told me about pepperoni being from pigs. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that. I wasn't traumatized. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? It's a normal thing. You're a human being. There's nothing wrong with consuming animal products. You are a fucking human being. You are an omnivore. This is what humans have done since we've existed on this planet. And I know when people say things like, oh, this is how it's always been, they say it's not an argument. And you're right, that is not an argument, because there are some other things where, well, it's how it's always been, but those are usually more social related things. This is a biological thing. Like saying we've always pissed and you suddenly stop pissing, that's a problem. When it's a biological, like natural function of the human body, or anything adjacent to that, like consuming food of a certain variety, like meat or animal products, you can make that argument because there's clearly a biological necessity for you to do that. If you didn't need to drink water, then you wouldn't be drinking water all the time. If humans didn't need to eat meat, the vast majority of them, then we wouldn't have been eating meat for the vast majority of our existence. That's just how that works. It's really not that complicated. We're gonna watch a little bit more of Earthling Ed's video before we wrap things up.
Meat for tofu, for example. It's about challenging that mentality, a specious mentality that essentially holds up these systems of animal exploitation. I might be obviously talking about these
I'm only going to talk for a second here. I know this video's going on for a while already, but the speciesist thing it just rubs me the wrong way. It's such a dumb, stupid argument. Like, do you think lions are speciesist because, they eat antelope or whatever? Like, no, they're not. Unfortunately, the vegans have to realize that animals can be consumed. And yes, we choose to not eat certain animals because perhaps they don't taste very good, or we've raised them to be companions, or they're not as nutrient dense as certain animals. There's a reason we don't eat cats and dogs. We've raised them to be companions to help us hunt other animals. Like, dogs have always been companions for helping us hunt, things like that. Cats have been domesticated for taking out vermin like rats. That's why we don't eat them. At least not here in Western culture. You go other places and eating dogs and cats is actually quite normal if that's what's available. Humans will eat whatever they have access to. It's not that crazy. Speciesism is the dumbest thing ever. The only quote unquote speciesism is humans versus anything that isn't a human, which is pretty normal, pretty natural in the animal kingdom. Lions typically don't eat other lions. Tigers typically don't eat other tigers. Bears typically don't eat other bears. Most species are programmed to want to protect their own and preserve the existence of each other. That is how a species thrives. The species does whatever it has to make sure their species continues to live on. That's like fundamental nature 101. So speciesism as an argument has to be the dumbest thing these vegans ever bring to the table.
Practical things that we need to change. What does living vegan mean day to day? But it's also about acknowledging how this change to veganism is about shifting our mindset, our mentality, viewing animals differently. I talk about the benefits to us as humans from ethically altering our relationship with non-human animals, how that's fulfilling for us as individuals and as a species, as well as a moral urgency when it comes to the well-being of other species too. So it's not just about the food aspect, it's the...
So this will be the last point. It's a good one though. I agree with Earthling Ed here. I think people should not completely detach their humanity from animals, right? And too many people do that. You have people like the steak and butter gal who literally just sees a cow and is like, that's a yummy steak for today. That's it. They don't see the cow as a cow. They see the cow as a steak. And that's not a good thing, because that's the kind of ideology that enables worldwide overconsumption, abuse of animals, and great deals of exploitation that are unnecessary. Because the truth is, if people ate less meat, they didn't just see animals as product, then there would actually be worldwide outcry for better living conditions and better treatment of animals. But because people generally don't care, because they only see the animal as food, the animals are treated as horribly as they can be within legal parameters. which is not great. And behind closed doors, a lot of times at certain places, they are significantly worse than what they're allowed to be legally. And even what they're allowed to be legally is not good, especially in factory farms. So I've been saying this for a minute now that, we need a push, not for veganism, but for something realistic, something tangible that could actually help animals in these industries. And veganism is not it. Now, Earthling Ed will never say veganism isn't the answer. He'll always try to push that narrative. But I think he even understands that if people just reduced how much meat they consume by some substantial margin, which is a much more tangible goal, that you could actually help animals in a very meaningful way, much more so than anything vegans have ever accomplished. So, if you're somebody who wants to help animals, I mean, consider buying meat and stuff like that from local farms, buying less of it, lower the demand. If everybody lowered their demand for it, then there could actually be change that would actually help. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll see you guys next time.